Now, we're going to be talking about, we're going to start a conversation about layers upon layers, and in the IT infrastructure. And to kick that off, I'm going to throw it over to Jason.
All right. Yes, layers. Not just onions, have layers. I basically just want to take a quick bite out of this huge thing we call IPv4 and just like get a tiny little piece of that and just hopefully completely and totally nail it, because I've had so many questions about the difference between layer 2 and layer 3 switches and when which is necessary. And I'm going to try not to get too in the weeds, but here we go. So, all right, we got to start somewhere. So what is a switch? A switch is a device with lots of ports that lets you create connections between devices so that they can exchange information. All right, well, what is a layer? In this case, we're talking about the OSI layers, that stands for Open Systems Interconnection. And this is the company or the standards body that's designed to lay out this incredibly complicated thing that is how everything on the internet gets moved from one software device all the way through a machine, all the way through a network, all the way through the cloud, all the way back down and in reverse, all the way to the other side of whatever you're doing. And in this case, layer 2 or layer 3 switches are multi-layer, and layer 3 switches are multi-layer and layer 2 switches are single layer. OSI has 7 total layers, and they're usually shown backwards from this, but I kind of like this to show my point. A layer 2 switch lives on OSI layer 2. A layer 3 switch lives on both layer 3 and layer 2. So it operates on the data link layer, and it handles local network traffic. Layer 2. Layer 3 operates on both the network layer and the data link layer, and it routes traffic across networks or across LANs or VLANs in this case. So, all right, what does that mean in terms of production? Well, usually we need to separate packets very quickly, not just for security, but also for efficiency. So, you've got these standards, Dante NDI. If you're streaming out, a stream directly out that can't be broken for anything. And I got to take a break to explain, I guess, one more thing. VLANs and subnets. VLANs are done by the router, and they break down traffic differently than VLANs. That's a terrible slide. VLANs both break down traffic, and the routers do subnets. VLANs do layer 3 switches do VLANs. So let's take our NDI example. NDI requires network segmentation, multicast support, QoS, jumbo frames, network redundancy, VLAN configuration, network monitoring. Okay, well, let's see how layer 2 handles that. In this case, proper network segmentation, difficult but can be done with layer 2 switches. It just requires a lot of kind of go-betweens. Multicast support, IGMP snooping. Pure L2 switches don't do any IGMP snooping or any other L3 snooping. QoS, I'm going to go with some will do it, but not really. Network redundancy, yeah, it can be done. VLAN configuration, no. It will follow VLAN, but it won't actually make good use of VLAN. It can follow VLANs, but it can't actually do anything other than that. All right, networking monitoring and management, continuous monitoring and issue resolution. Okay, so how does that actually stack up? There we go. Yeah, there are some exceptions to this, but for the most part, layer 2 switches can be used for NDI, but you can't just let them loose on a direct network, or you're going to end up with a lot of switches going in a lot of weird directions, and things are just going to get complicated. Another thing to say about layer 3 switches is that they are not routers. Routers are designed to do WAN interconnects. A layer 3 switch won't play nice with lots of diverse or complex WANs. A router also is built for QoS, and it's built for designing hierarchies of QoS. Layer 3 switch, although it sometimes relies on the router, it's hard to say whether or not it's actually going to do this very well without very rote descriptions. The really big one here is that a router always has a firewall, and a layer 3 switch does not. Last, of course, VPN intrusion detection. Yeah, some layer 3 switches have the capacity for that, but not really. We will leave it at that. Let's take another example. In production, mDNS. Here's the flow chart that I'm going to go down, layer 2 or layer 3 switch, and forget the rest of that because I'm going to zoom it in. Layer 2 is on the left, layer 3 is on the right. Let's say mDNS traffic, if it's local on a layer 2 switch, it's going to get dropped, just completely dropped. If it's not local, it'll be dropped. If it is local, then it will forward. If mDNS traffic is local on a layer 3, then it will forward the traffic within the local network. If it's not, then it will route the traffic to other networks. So the difference is right there. Routing. Here's the real difference when it comes to networking. If a packet will be on a different VLAN network, it will, let me get back, there it is. The level 2 switch will actually rely on the router, and it will send the packet back to the router in order to complete the packet request. A layer 3 or a level 3 switch will be able to route it directly to the destination network without the router. So just to try to wrap this up, layer 2 switches are more efficient. Layer 3 switches are slightly less efficient. Layer 2 switches ID by MAC address. Layer 3 switches ID by IP address and or MAC address. Let's see. Use case. Why is that not right? Okay. Small to medium network, layer 3 larger networks, and I would say production networks unless you're going to be really, really specific. And layer 3, of course, for routing and traffic management. There you have it. About half of the slides just got dropped. Thank you, brand new iPad and the beta of iPad OS.
Yeah, so if we've got a bunch of questions that are popping up in the chat. The best place for the questions is to pop up in the questions. so if you have questions, we've got some great resources here to answer those questions related to that. Go ahead and throw those questions in. We'll go ahead to the first question.
First question is from Supreet Singh in Bangalore. I have 2 pretty decent internet lines to my studio. We're running 5 machines all connected to the internet. What's the best way to bond these 2 internet lines for unbreakable webrtc/voice over IP?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So what you need for bonding is you'll need a router that's able to create a bonding network. And then you also need a destination where that bond is being broken out into the internet again. We use a lot of Peplinks. The cheapest and probably best way for this would be to use a Peplink BR1, or BR1 Plus, which is the 4G that also gets you 4G, or the BR1 5G, which gets you 5G. It supports 2 WAN ports, so you can plug both of those in. That's how I'm working right now. And then you have to really decide what you want to do. You could do Speed Fusion, and that is their bonding technology. At that point, it will be bonding both links together. One thing to keep in mind is that, especially if they are different latencies, you might actually have a worse experience through the bond if you're not careful with the latency. Through LTE, we sometimes have the issue that depending on the network, we see jumps up to 200 milliseconds of round trip time during congested areas, which then means the bond is being broken because Peplink only supports X amount of milliseconds of round trip latency difference. You can set that, but that requires some fiddling. One really great feature that the Speed Fusion does have, even if you set it up where it only uses one internet connectivity and then has a second one as active standby, you can use something called WAN smoothing. So what's really important for VoIP and especially WebRTC is that it doesn't have a way to keep packets in order, and also is not the best at dealing with packet loss. So those are the 2 things you really want to keep in mind, get your jitter down, get your packet loss down, and that will immensely help with your WebRTC experience. On the Peplink side, what you can do there is WAN smoothing. Basically, it allows you, if you that helps with packet loss, so you can tell it how much more bandwidth it can use. I think it goes up to 3x the bandwidth. So keep in mind that you need to allocate way more bandwidth than for that. I would say that probably you want to segment networks out on your Peplink that allows you to have one network that's just like general internet access. You probably don't want to run that through your Speed Fusion tunnel, because on the other side, you probably are in a cloud where you're breaking out, and then you probably need to pay egress fees there. But one really great thing is in the WAN smoothing that helps you get rid of packet loss. And that is what, similar to what Speedify, for example, does when they claim that they improve WebRTC. One thing to keep in mind is your latency will get higher. And if you need to combat jitter, you can set a receive buffer on the Speed Fusion hub. So at that point, you will increase your latency by 50 milliseconds. So if you have a jitter, that means the round trip time between different packets, the minimum to maximum round trip time jumps, let's say 20 milliseconds. What I would do is I would probably set up a 15 to 30 milliseconds of receive buffer. That way I'm adding 15 to 30 milliseconds of latency to my whole pipeline. But the great thing at that point is it will hold those packets and make sure that they're in the right order and that is not a jitter. So you will get a constant stream of packets. Zoom is amazing at their networks. So often for Zoom, you don't need to do that. But for VoIP and WebRTC, I think that will be the best solution. There's other SD-WAN solutions that you can also do. But Peplink, the BR1, it's like $300, and you get a free Speed Fusion Hub 1 connection license. So that's really a great solution for everyone. That's what I use at my home with 2 network connectivities. And then you can set it up that it either does bonding, if you need more speed or better reliability. You can also do bonding with 1 connection to combat packet loss or jitter. Or you can have it in failover like I do, where if one internet goes down, it will jump over to the next one. And if that one goes down, I take out my phone, plug it into the front port over USB-C, and it will tether with my phone, and I have LTE that way.
Good guy.
Yeah, the way I was taught was don't aggregate those 2 if you can avoid it. So if you have 2 decent internet connections, I would just change it to failover only. You can run some speed tests and make sure that one of them has the best jitter and pick that one as your primary, and then set the second one for your failover. Because if you aggregate the 2 together, now all of a sudden you can introduce more wow flutter, and you can have all this just excess processing that's going on that doesn't need to occur. So if you want the lowest, just point to point, I would just go failover only and not bond anything together. I would take the strongest of the two, and you could use like Cloudflare speed test to double check and see which of the connections is the best.
Next question.
Next question's from Supreet Singh in Bangalore. We are using Peplink Balance 2, but sometimes we get freezes in voice over IP calls.
I think that's going to, I'm going to guess that is, yeah, go ahead, Jonas.
Yeah, so I would say that is probably an issue with the jitter or the packet loss. That's where you can use those settings in SpeedFusion to do it. Peplink isn't magic. It still is sadly bound to the reality of physics. So if you have big latency differences, that's where we see most issues. So I would look into those settings, go into in control, look at the SpeedFusion tunnel. You can also do a WAN analysis to like send a bunch of data through it and test it that way. But yeah, I would look at those settings.
Next question.
This one's for me. How do the concepts of network layers come in if you're not in an enterprise environment? Do I need to understand network layers in my home studio?
Go, Jason.
Well, it's not a bad idea, so it can certainly save you some money. If you can physically segment a layer 2 switch, for example, to do only Dante, if it can do all of your Dante, then you're going to end up saving a lot more money. So, no, you don't need to, and it's certainly not an only enterprise thing. I guess I should say that the inverse of that is also not true. Many really big networks. And when I say small to medium, keep in mind I'm talking about small to medium businesses, which is usually, 50 for small and 500 for medium. So, these do scale really, really well. It's just that production requires an incredible amount of bandwidth.
Go ahead, Alex.
Sorry, I actually raised my hand on the wrong question.
Very good. Yeah. The thing to note is that as you start to understand what the network means when you're looking at it, it does help. So understanding that when you look at 255, 255, that's a mask, and that's going to tell you where your devices are. And it's going to just be in that case, it'll be in the last one, and that's where all your devices are living. In those things. And for instance, for me, as a very basic thing at my house, I know what the IPs are going to be delivered from my ISP provider and what IPs are going to be delivered from my router. And so when I open something up, I know which one I'm looking at. So like am I connecting straight to the outside, or am I connecting internally? And so starting to understand some of those things, those very basic things, I think really, really help. Have you start to understand how to build your network. And a lot of times we are still networking between a bunch of computers, and understanding, are we overloading the switches? Are we creating too much traffic? Are we creating too much traffic in one subnet? These are all things that we have to pay attention to, because, I don't know I have problems in my home server, like of creating too much traffic among things, and I've had to kind of segment things out to make sure that I still get the things I need to go through that process. Next question.
Next question is from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. I love my GL.iNet router. I often find myself describing it as a layer 2.5 router, as it doesn't get involved in STP. Makes sense to me, but not always to the system administrator at an event venue. How could I describe a GL.iNet router to inspire confidence?
Does anyone have any? I'll have to admit that I'm not as familiar with the GL.iNet net router. Go ahead, Jonas.
I would probably say, if you say something like it's a 2.5 layer router, that will weird out any sysadmin out, because it's IT. There isn't like a 2.5. It's like does layer 3 actions, but doesn't the SPT specific. I would probably tell to them it's a router. It will, on the LAN side, will associate its own DHCP addresses. Here's its MAC address. Let me know if you need more information. I try to give them all the information they need, but not more. Because if I give them more information, that sounds weird. Now they have to make a decision. Are they willing to risk getting yelled at by their boss because the network went down because you do something weird? And telling someone that you have a router that is a 2.5 layer router probably is categorized as what's that? That I don't understand. That's weird. I would honestly just say it's a router. Doesn't really matter to him what you're doing. Put it in NAT mode. Tell him, hey, it's in a NAT mode. We have our own IP addresses, and that's it. I've never had an issue with that. You might run into the miracle of corporate IT that is, oh, it's broken. Can you check? Oh, yeah, I'll check. And they come back and say, oh, is it? Can you check again if it's working now? And suddenly everything will be working. Your port is 3. Then you ask, did you change something? No, everything is the same. And that'll be that.
and I can't underscore what Jonas was talking about of how important it is when you're working as you go into larger and larger events. Every piece of equipment that you use, how you dress, how you show up, what kind of routers you use, everything. People are making decisions about whether you're weird or not. Like, just so you know, like it is like we get into this thing, do not get creative on a production. Like in my opinion, like you don't get creative about how you put things together. You do things in a way that when someone looks at it from the outside, they go, oh, that makes sense to me. Be creative in your own studio, be creative in your own home, be creative when you're working on those things. But you better really know it all the way down if you're going to show up with anything that's weird. And so the thing is that like we show up with Meraki or Ubiquity or Cisco or, and I don't use anything else. I have other things. I don't use them when I show up at an event because if I'm talking to IT, I want them to look at the router and understand what it is, and understand that it's a real router. It's a real, you have real money put behind it. And I know that that's an expensive way to do it, but I can tell you as someone who went from showing up with was showing up with egg crates on a like one of those things they use for catering. Like that was my first show, like, of showing up, not knowing anything about load in. And by the time I was done, I had a production truck, and I can tell you that as you move through it, you learn that everyone's making decisions. Everyone's making decisions about you, and you're getting either closer or further away from the front of the bus. Because what happens is that when an event goes bad, there's this Chinese fire drill, and someone's going to end up in front of the bus. And the more that you are an outlier in the way that you approach your production, the closer you are to the front of the bus, it's easier for someone to just shove you there. So you just have to be careful of that because most of the corporate work is surviving the bus. Go ahead, Jonas.
And what I would also say is, since we're talking about how to behave on site and how to get the IT team on your side, which that's the team you need on your side. Because let's be real, if we go into a corporate office, everything we do looks suspicious to the firewall, to anyone monitoring, because you're starting probably a tunnel, something that's encrypted, and you're streaming a whole bunch of data. That's exactly what any malicious actor that got access that is trying to exfiltrate data also will do. So it's really important that you are clear what you're doing. And what I would say is don't bore them with details or don't give them too much detail. Break it down to your interfaces. I need one LAN cable that has this on it. Please make sure these ports are open. This is how it will be interfaced. We'll have a router on there. Please give it an IP address. That's it. Like break it down to the interfaces and what you actually need or what you're giving them. And I've had success everywhere with that because the IT people, they don't want to make tough decisions. They want to have a good day as well.
And, just and beyond anybody in the infrastructure, I have one guy that I hire for big events that he doesn't have a job. Like literally I pay him, I don't know, $1,500 a day or whatever, just to be around, and he walks around, he's got a jacket full of cigars. It's a really funny thing. He's been doing this business in 50 years or whatever. And anytime something goes wrong, I just send him that direction, but what he's doing the whole day is making friends. And he's literally just walking around. He gives the truck driver a Cuban cigar and he's there talking and they're doing their thing and everything else. And he's just greasing. He's just laying grease out the whole time. And we have done some incredible fixes, locked out of a broadcast truck to do an SMT. And he breaks into the broadcast truck with the permission of the broadcast truck owner because he did all the groundwork for 2 days, to build that relationship and really over years. So, really paying attention to all the people around you and making sure that you're getting along with everybody is good. And the first step is just doing things that they expect you to do. And the second step is being nice about it. And the third step is really just constantly building those relationships. Next question.
Next question's for me. Can you explain the basics of the domain name system and what exactly mDNS is?
Go ahead, Jonas.
So the domain name system takes a domain name like google.com and translates that into an IP address that your browser or your computer then can use to connect to that. That's the basics. There's a whole bunch of systems between that. If you look at it, there's like the .com domain. That domain is registered, and then your computer knows, oh, I need to ask that server for where is that domain. Then, for example, for google.com, Google would be asked, hey, can you tell us the server if I need to access something from your domain that I need to look things up in? And then they get sent to your domain server. Then depending on what you're doing, if you're sending email, if you're sending different protocols, if you're trying to use a subdomain, it will answer those requests. What makes this whole thing complicated and why you have this the sentence that if you have done anything in the internet, it will take up to 48 hours to apply those changes you've heard all day long, is there is a whole world of caching between that. Your provider might cache it, your router might cache it. There's like a couple more caches in between there. And it might take some time to propagate those changes. So if you ever have done like a move from a website from one server to the other one, always keep both active for at least, I would say, 3 days, just so you're for sure covered. Because what it means is someone in another country where maybe your domain has been already used, they cached it, but that cache isn't invalidated yet. So it's still within the range of where it says, yep, that's probably still accurate information, might still be sent to your old server. So what I try to do if I migrate is I'll do an active combination. You do want to add like a red dot or something somewhere. So when you visit the website, you know where it is. But DNS is really painful to debug when you have an issue like that. I use dnschecker.com. That helps you just get, hey, here is the IP address in 50 different servers. Now let's talk about mDNS. If you are on your local network, you probably don't have a DNS server set up for your local network. But it would be really painful if you always need to know every single IP address of everything and need to find it. And mDNS is basically a zero config protocol that broadcasts into the network, hey, I am this, here's my IP address. So the ATEM, for example, says, hey, I'm an ATEM mini extreme ISO. My IP address is 192.168.10.15. What your computer then can do is, on Windows, you can just type in the host name, and then that will be resolved. Sometimes that does involve the router that tells you, hey, this is the host name, here's the IP address, but it's basically the same thing. mDNS also is a translation of name to IP address, because none of the systems actually can work with names. Just the mechanism is a little different, where how you know what IP address to use. So, for example, an mDNS also allows you to announce services. So, for example, the Elgato key lights, they announce an Elgato.light something. And they tell you on this port you can find, on this IP address, an Elgato key light that you can talk to. We talk about mDNS a lot when we talk about NDI. What's actually happening behind there is they have a message that's like, hey, I am a thing that could have NDI. If you want to check what I have, here's the port and the IP address that you can check on. And NDI runs a tiny little server on your system that tells it, hey, these are the sources that I have. Feel free to grab one. So mDNS, DNS both have similar, but DNS is global. It's managed. You have all the servers there, and it might take up to 48 hours. mDNS is local, doesn't rely on a centralized service, which sometimes that's a problem that we see with NDI, right? Like one device sees it, the other device doesn't, because you have a problem with the transmission of that mDNS signal. But basically, they do the same thing. They take something that we humans understand and read easily and convert it into a bunch of numbers.
Next question.
Next question's from Douglas Carmichael. Has anyone had any experience with AVB? macOS supports it natively, and Audiomovers OMNIBUS supports it for moving audio streams between Macs. What AVB switch does the panel recommend?
Go ahead, Alex.
I have worked with AVB on various digital consoles. PreSonus Studio Live consoles use AVB technology. I've also worked with Mode 2 products. Mode 2 has jumped in pretty hard with the AVB protocol there, audio video bridging. I'm trying to remember what it stands for. But yes, it's pretty good. We're talking about an IEEE standard here that's audio over IP, like similar to Dante in what it does. And generally, if you're buying particular hardware like Mode 2 or PreSonus, they're going to want to sell you their own AVB switches, and they'll generally recommend it because that's what they support for optimal compatibility. So I would, if you want to get support from those companies, you probably want to use the network switch that they recommend.
Next question.
Next one's for me. Are VLANs complicated? I asked an IT friend of mine to help me configure my Ubiquity hardware to create some VLANs to isolate my ATEM and isolate my DMX network, but he recommended against it. Thoughts?
Go ahead, Alex.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of context. So he's an experienced IT guy. He recommended against it only because he said it added additional complexity. Now, I'm not sure if he was trying to get me to not do it just because I'd probably call him if I had a problem. But, I mean, it's not like he doesn't understand the need for it. But, I mean, currently, my concerns were live streaming. So I want live streaming stability. And I've been live streaming for a few months through my ATEM, and it's been very stable. So I suppose if I don't have a problem, is there really a need to still separate stuff out of into VLAN? So I'm not sure if I should do that. So if anyone has any suggestions why I still need to do that, I have all my DMX lights on the network as well, and I have other stuff in the house. So I just have concerns about segregating all that stuff.
Go, Jason.
VLANs by themselves, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, are not complicated. However, very rarely can you completely segment something and then just like chop it off from the rest of the world. That doesn't usually happen. So you usually end up needing to create firewall exceptions, configurations that allow certain ports of certain traffics and certain protocols between your VLANs. And then you have to propagate that throughout your entire network. That's complicated.
Go, Jonas.
I would say if you're using ARPANET or any form of lighting control, that's a really chatty protocol and you probably want to separate it. I personally would probably even buy another switch and put it on there because I'm so scarred by some of the lighting protocols. But yeah, what Jason said, the easy part is chopping it off and making things not talk to each other. But then you're going to call him and be like, hey, so my lighting controller on my PC can't talk to it anymore. What now? And all that. And I think that's where it's most complicated. But I would say, hey, read a couple articles about it, look into what it actually means, and try it while you're not on production. It's not that complicated, but be sure that, think about it, that you're actually separating your network, and think about where you need to build bridges. Like mDNS might not work. It might work. It's a Ubiquity switch. And sometimes Ubiquity is really weird with VLANs. That might also be in why he's not sure, but give it a try.
Next question.
Next question is from Douglas Carmichael. My local fiber provider will be offering 2 gigabits per second symmetrical fiber, and I'm looking at upgrading to a multi-gigabit Ethernet switch. For a network that isn't dedicated to AVoIP, would the NETGEAR M4300 range be better than the M4250?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, go, Jason.
I don't know either, but I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to, in order to actually get any use out of that, you're going to need to completely upgrade your network all the way from the gateway, all the way down to, and if not, yeah, probably not worth it.
Next question. Oh, sorry, Jonas. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're not using an AV over IP or anything like that, first of all, I don't think you need a multi-gigabit switch if you're not needing it. But you'll probably be fine with an unmanaged switch. And then if you actually need it, get the switch that makes sense for AV over IP. But like for general use, I don't think you need to buy either.
And Jeff Keithley says the M4300 is not worth it in the cost difference for what you're doing. Next question.
Next question is from Aaron Cody in St. Louis, Missouri. We've developed a bit from layers specifically, but does anyone want to tackle LAGs and trunking?
I think it's a whole second hour. so we're gonna tackle that, but we'll tackle it when we're ready for that. So it's great. One thing I want to outline is how many, having some great IT people here on Fridays. Hopefully we'll continue to have have Jonas and Terry and Guy and Alex and Jason here and more. But we'd really love to keep on having these long conversations. I think when you see this as an opportunity and when you see these panelists on, it's a great opportunity to start asking questions about your network. So we're not going to get into trunking today, but in general, asking those kind of questions as you start to figure them out, it's a great opportunity to throw those questions into the first hour, even if we're not talking about that in the second hour. But it's a good time to learn those things. So definitely look at that as an opportunity. I want to thank the panelists for all the answers. It's really great to have you all here. Can't do this without you. It was a great first hour and a great second hour. So I want to thank you all for your participation, and thanks for being here. And if you're interested in being a panelist, look out for those announcements on new panelists. But the panelists make a huge difference here to making this show actually work. Thanks to our online producers who are watching this and making this possible as well by asking all the questions. This really is a show that we all do together, and so your questions drive the show and make sure that and guide us towards what you're most interested in. And thanks to the incredible crew, the dev crew that makes all of these shows possible, the production crew that's doing these shows, the management crew that makes sure that the content's ready to go. We appreciate all of your support and help in making this actually possible. If we had traveled in the Tlaloc Traversal, we'd walked around and had these questions one at a time, we would have traveled 89,000 miles. That's 144,000 kilometers, and that is 708 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. It's good.
Cool.
Covered a lot of ground
Fireside
today.
Chat? Is that Fireside Chat at 4 p.m. in After Hours, or what is that? How's that work?
The Fireside Chats, those are the me just interviewing somebody.
So that'll be on YouTube.
They're on YouTube right now. Yeah. Are you talking about the evening show? The evening show is not a Fireside Chat.
Dave Wiskus?
That one's still...
Guy?
We're still working on we had to reschedule that one. So we're
gotcha.
still working on that. Yeah. So we'll have that one up there. But you'll see this. They're all on YouTube as I record them. So yeah, we're looking forward to getting him back on. All right. Thanks everybody.